Hey skaters, welcome back to another very special episode of GSN News. In today's episode, we have a coaching legend, Ryan Shimabukuro.
Yeah, Ryan was gracious enough to join us for a second time now. He joined us for the coaches panel that we did last year from Norway. And today he's gonna answer a few more questions for us. And then we're gonna have a little debate topic as well, which I think will be very interesting to uncover. But if you aren't aware, Ryan is the sprint national team coach for the U.S. and he's been coaching for quite a long time in the U.S. He also did a little stint in Japan. Anything else you want to add there, right guy?
Oh, thank you for having me on. It was fun last year and looking to have some fun again today.
Cool. And we do plan on having another coaches panel, I think with all three U.S. coaches, so Ryan, Gabriel Gerard, and Steve Goff from the short track side, so that'll also be interesting at some point here in the future, whenever we can wrangle them at the same time. But our first topic is really who's the best skater of all time in your opinion?
Wow.
Quick answer.
Me, that's easy.
And now this to preface for the debate, we're thinking, the best skater of all time that across all the disciplines. So if somebody has done short track, long track, and inlines at a high level, that's extra points. If they've only done one, they lose points, but maybe they're good enough to count for it. So, what do you think?
For me, it's no debate. It's still Eric Heiden. I mean, granted, maybe his span of work was a very short period of time, but if you look in the 4 years in the two Olympics that he competed in 76 and then had his coming out the next year in 77, 4 World Sprint Championships, 3 World All-Around titles, 2 Junior World Championships, the only skater to win all 3 in the same year twice, and doing all 5 distances in the same games. When it was outdoor, you had to deal with weather and specialists. Those are all NBDs, never been dones.
Yeah.
I don't know how you argue that. Granted, I could see like if somebody had a 10 or 15 year span, that's great, but like he did it in 4 years. To quote Bonnie Blair, I have 5 gold medals too, but it took me 3 Olympics and it took Eric only 1.
It took him 2 weeks.
Yeah. So.
Oh darn! It took me 3 Olympics, and 5 gold medals. That's really knock on your resume.
Right.
But speaking of Bonnie, she's somebody that comes to mind, and also we want to invite you because you know so much history about speed skating. But Bonnie Blair was a world champion on short track.
Correct.
Before being a world champion and Olympic champion on long track. So where would she rank on your list? Also Guiton Boucher is up there, right, as the same thing. So
yeah, I mean, obviously that's really special. I hold them both in high regards to both be world short track champions before becoming world champion and Olympic champions on long track. In terms of female greatest athlete, she's right up there, probably at least in the top 3, because not only does she have 5 individual gold medals and a bronze and 3 world sprint championships and obviously world records in the 500 and the sprint combination, she's only one of 3 athletes to three-peat in their event. She three-peated in the 500. You have Claudia Pechstein who three-peated in the 5K, and then you had Sven who three-peated in the 5K as well. I think that's pretty darn impressive considering the consistency that she had, not only throughout her career, through different programs and coaches that she skated under. I think that speaks a lot.
yeah.
Especially in the 500. Like that, any misstep,
Right.
you go from 1st to 5th, we're in the 5K, I'm going to have a bad stroke.
And if you watch Bonnie's career from, when she started to really come onto the scene in 86, 87, and then to the end of her career in 1995, and she only skated 1 more year after Lillehammer because we had the World Sprints in Milwaukee. She said, I don't think I could sit in the stands and watch, the World Sprints when I was still good and going out on top. But the fact is, if you watch her career, she just got better and better, to the very end. I mean, she's still the only female. She has the fixed blade world record in the 500 at a 38.6, and that was in her last season.
It's still fast.
Yeah, first woman to go under 39 seconds. So she has obviously a lot of accolades And I would argue, I mean, maybe she doesn't see that, there's other sprinters from East Germany and the Soviet Union that were very good, and Canada. You look at Katrina Lemay, very impressive sprinter, but I still think Bonnie's consistency would arguably put her at the top of the best female sprinter of all time.
We also have a couple of inliners that did the double world champion, Olympic champion, Michelle Mulder, Bart Swings, Chad Hedrick.
Yeah.
If I'm missing out on any.
I'm sure some others, but yeah, that's where the debate gets interesting. Like Chad he was on our top 10 list of just ice skaters. He could be, in that range if he's not on the top 10, maybe top 15, especially because it was such a short period of time that he did all of that. Started so late after a career where he had 52 world titles on inlines. Like he's, I think, the best inliner ever. You could argue that Joey is, but still 52 is a pretty tough number to argue against.
Nearly double Joey's.
Right. So that's regardless, even if you put him second best inliner of all time. And then if he's on our top 10 list of ice skaters, again, he does have 5 Olympic medals.
Right.
He set some world records.
World all-around champion.
Right. So
World single distance champion. So
yeah.
World record, all of it basically. We still have to see the first short track, inline, and long track world champion.
Right.
Well, there's some interesting, younger skaters like Corey, I think, is one that.
Oh yeah,
now I don't know if she's a senior world champion on inlines.
I don't believe so.
But junior world champion for sure. She only dabbled with long track, but was not bad right off the bat. Is working her way up the ranks on short track. So she could be in the running for an argument. But yeah, who would you put after Eric if you think about all the skaters over time? Ariana Fontana, Victor Ahn,
Right.
Woost is up there, but
again, this is kind of like a GOAT debate, right?
Right.
Topic, and I think a lot of it comes down to individual feelings and what's important to you, and also it's generational. Because if you look at Lydia Skoblikova from the Soviet Union, she also did an NBD. She won four individual distances for the women at the Olympic Games. And back then, the women didn't have a 5th distance until 1988 in Calgary when the 5,000 was added to the program.
Right.
So she definitely would be up there. Woost, obviously. It ain't the amount of accomplishments that she's done. I had this conversation with her once on a bus going to or from the Oval, and I'm like, it's amazing to me that you get overshadowed by Sven. Granted, Sven is in that category as well, but she agrees. She's like, I don't know what I gotta do to get the respect and get the sponsorships that you would think would come with that kind of resume.
For sure.
Karen Konyan-Inky, for sure. I mean, she won both sprint and world all-around titles, Olympic champ, every color of Olympic medals, multiple. Miho's probably the closest in the current generation. Johan Olaf Koss. I mean, the consistency and the domination, overcoming injuries within that time period to finish out his career with 3 Olympic gold medals and 3 world records. It's just to pinpoint just 1 or 2 right after that. That's hard. I mean, Sven is definitely in that running because the longevity that he displayed was darn impressive.
It seems like, at least from watching the two of them over the years, Woost was the most dominant at the Olympics. World singles, she was still good, but not as good as the Olympics. And then at World Cups, she was not anything to write home about for how good she was at the big moments. Whereas Sven seemed to have won every single time for a long time. And he also did it in exciting fashion. He's also way more vocal. So that's what I think why he got a bigger name. Was just toying with people in 5Ks and then making it dramatic at the end. Whereas Woost was just good. Just good for a long time.
If I'm a betting man, I'm going to put my money on her. You know, it doesn't matter. You know, and same with Bonnie. If I'm a betting man, I'm putting my money on her. So,
Right.
but yeah, like I still recall Sven being sick in the World Cup at Tee-Off one year, and there was question on whether or not he was going to race or not because he had a fever and this and that, and he ended up racing, and about 2/3 of the way into the race, he's behind Boko head to head, and everyone's kind of like, oh, this is the first 5K Sven's going to lose.
Right.
I can't remember what year it was, but then you could see his facial expression change, and you could just see that competitiveness in him, the mental toughness. Go, hell no, and he just clawed his way back to win that 5K. Not only to win his pair, but to win that 5K. That was pretty darn impressive.
Yeah.
I admired that at the end of his career that he still, when he went out against Patrick at the time where Patrick is the best, he would still sometimes just give it everything, like try and be like pure kind of killer instinct.
Right,
Yeah,
exactly.
I like that. You know, from the short track side, we have, I think on our debate it was a little tough because Ariana Fontana is like the worst, where at the Olympics she's phenomenal. But then at World Championships, probably a name that most people don't even know is Yang Yang He,
Right.
who was way better than anybody else in history. 40-something World Championship medals. Just wasn't as many as Ari at the games. But you know, somebody like Termors, who has a gold medal on both,
More
Olympic medals on both, I should say.
More Olympic medals than World Cup medals.
Right.
In long track, that's crazy.
Yeah. Also medal in short track. You know, Sung Hoon Lee was world championship medalist in short track, and then very quickly after switches over to long track and wins gold there.
Right.
So
Medal.
And remember, Shawnee has a world championship medal in short track as well.
Shawnee's the next one, right? Like he's up for debate as one of, if not the best skater ever, too.
Yeah.
On the men's side, and
Looking at how long
also
his
did do short
world
track
record
at a
stuff for us.
pretty darn high level. Do you know anything about Eric Flaim's career?
Oh,
'Cause
sure.
I know that he went over to inlines and competed as well.
So Eric
That's
was,
not nice for me.
yeah, Eric Flaim was one of my good friends and mentors still to this day. You know, 1988, he was Olympic silver medalist in the 1500 in Calgary. He was first pair out, breaks the world record, and a couple of pairs later, he had to settle for the silver. You know, by 600 to the second to Andre Hoffman from East Germany. Later, 3 weeks later, he's winning his world all-around title in Medale. And eventually ended up getting some knee problems and never skated long track at the same level again. And then after taking a year off from 92 to 93, decided to, right around after Albertville, took some time off, switched to short track, and made the national team going into the Olympic season in 94, trained with the national team in Milwaukee under Jeroen Otter, makes the Olympic team, and was the anchor leg in the men's silver medal winning relay for the U.S. So he's got silver medals both in long track and short track. He's the first to ever do it.
And we need to know from somebody his background on inlines. Because
So-
I heard he also went
So this is
made
another
the
kind of debate.
U.S. team later.
Not so much debatable. So back then in the 90s, they used to have down at Disney World in Florida, ABC put on this, I forgot what it's called, like a summer skate jam or something like that. It was televised. You brought in all the best hockey players, figure skaters, ice speed skaters, and inliners, and they would have different races, 100-meter races. They would have 1,500-meter road course, and some other things.
Bring this back. That sounds super cool.
Yeah.
It was on ABC's
Jamboree.
Wild World of Sports. And Flaim, from out of all the ice competitors, he's the only one that could compete against like a Tony and Dante Muse, you know, the best top inliners at the time and so forth. And Eric is one of those guys, like he's a skater, grew up on playing hockey when he was young, then switched over to short track. He was a divisional national champion in the early 80s, and then switched to long track. So you put him on any kind of skates,
Right.
and he will kick your butt. You know? So, and he won the 10K outdoor nationals and inline. The U.S. National Team was on their way from Colorado Springs up to Calgary in the fall, and on the way they drove from Colorado Springs to California to do the nationals, and Flaim wins the 10K national title. You know, and I can't remember if he officially...
The U.S. team was very good at the time.
Yeah,
Derek,
and
the Muse brothers.
There were some like backlash. A lot of the inliners didn't like that. Like they're like arguing, like, oh, it's too short of a distance and this and that. And you know, after that, like Eric was kind of,
it's too short.
yeah, Eric was kind of put off. Like instead of being like celebrated, he was kind of like jeered. And you know, after that, it was kind of like, oh, I don't really want to participate if that's the way it's going to be.
Right.
You know? I just actually had this conversation with him a couple of years ago to kind of go through that time frame. It's like, no, you're absolutely right, you know, and they did it as a courtesy. They were asked to come and participate.
Right.
It wasn't like they had to. They weren't sponsored. They were all skating on inferior equipment compared to the inline community.
Ooh, gonna have to ask Derek about this one too.
Yeah, and I think Derek was there. Yeah, Booty was
But
there.
you forgot about it.
Yeah, Booty was definitely there because I remember having that discussion with him as well. And at one point, maybe Eric did some races for Team Rollerblade. I can't remember exactly, but I do know that like Flaim and Booty were good friends right away from the beginning when Booty made the switch over in 1993 to ice. And yeah, so Flaim is definitely should be on, you know, in the discussion and debate as a multi-sport, you know, successful athlete.
I like that.
I like the fact that he broke the world record in the first pair.
Yep.
I wonder if that ever happened before or after.
Well, you got to remember back then, you know, the way the pairings went was not like it is now. And I asked my former coaches, I'm like, how did they do in Calgary? Because a lot of the pairs were really mixed match. So like Bonnie, when she won the gold medal and broke the world record in her 500, she was paired with Sofia Tokarczyk from Poland, and it was literally a 2-second gap. Like Sofia went 41, you know, and so forth. So when I talked to my former coach,
People
Mike
whine
Crow,
about the pairs now.
yeah. So if I remember our conversation, he said back then, like basically the countries they would have blocks of like 4 to 8 skaters, and you could put in your own skater seated based on where you thought the resurfaces were going to be. So you potentially could have the best ice conditions.
Yeah.
So it wasn't based off the World Cup ranking or, you know, stuff like that. You weren't grouped that way. You were still drawn, but you were drawn within this group. So if you were paired against, you know, maybe a smaller country that was still their best skater, but there was a big gap, you know. So if you go back and watch Calgary, a lot of their races, there's a lot, like in the 5K, you wouldn't even see the second skater in the pair. Yeah.
Okay, that's a good change.
Yeah.
I like that.
Which actually kind of leads us to our next topic of discussion is, you know, what over the past, you know, since you started coaching or even since you were skating, like what do you think have been the main things that have changed training philosophy-wise or just like how things run?
When did you get into skating?
So I started skating in 1985 in Hawaii at the Ice Palace hockey rink. It's been a while, and but again, that was just recreational skating on the weekend with friends. I first started entering our speed skating class, again, only on hockey skates, 1 hour a week of ice, and then supplementing that with, you know, skating public sessions on Friday and Saturdays. I didn't go to my first actual training camp until the summer of 1987. That was an ASU development camp in Marquette, Michigan. Diane Holm was the head coach, who was Eric Hyden's coach. She was also a 3-time Olympic team coach for the U.S. And Guy Daniel from Canada, who was a 2-time short track world champion, may he rest in peace, was the ice coach for that camp. And what I thought was going to be like just some development camp ended up, it was 6 months before Calgary. You had skaters both on the short track and long track side that were going to be competing in Calgary 6 months later. But you also had kids from like midget division age to masters division age. And boy, I was way in over my head. Never had done dryland training, had no idea what it was about. Didn't even get on a pair of used short track skates until I flew up to LA to meet with Jerry Search for a couple of days. He set me up with his skates, showed me how to sharpen skates, ran me through a session at the Paramount Ice Rink with the Demora Ice Club, and then went on to the camp. And from there, on the way home, I bought those skates for $150, and you know, I just said that this is what I want to do, and dedicated my life after that. I quit everything else that I was doing at the time, and bought all 7 VHS tapes of the camp that Jerry filmed, because he filmed the classroom lectures, all the ice and dryland training sessions and this and that. And that became my coach for like 1 year until I could go back to the camp. So
Can we explain what a VHS tape is?
it's one of those big.
Wow, I love the history of this.
I want to tell everybody out there, since then, Ryan has gotten much bigger on dryland.
Yeah. So
Personal experience.
to your original question, like what I've seen biggest changes, like back in the 80s and 90s, everything it seemed like more about anaerobic power. A lot of hard efforts, a lot of rest, full recovery. Then it, became a little bit more anaerobic capacity, being able to sustain high levels of lactate for a longer period of time. And Diane Holm, I remember in one of the first classroom lectures, she said, the first thing a speed skater has to learn is how to produce lactate, because if you can't produce it, you can't tolerate it. And toleration is a huge physiological factor in speed skating. So, and that takes time. To develop speed skating specific muscles takes a lot of time. But then you would see that more on the middle to long distance side, not so much the sprinters. Now, over the last, I would say 10 to close to 20 years now, definitely was more on the capacity side. I think Shawnee was actually one of the first guys to really take his short track experience and utilize that, because when he started to really cut into the time of the 1,000 and 1,500 meter, and he wouldn't win it in the first 600. He was always winning in his last lap. That made me kind of look at my program. There was times where Cheek was right there with him to the 600, even 800. I thought, okay, this is it. Like, Shawnee's going to lose, and Shawnee could come back in that last 200 and get him at the line. Right. So after the Torino Olympics, I had to really reevaluate my program. I'm like, okay, I've got 2/3 of the program. I'm missing this. At least speaking for me, and I think nowadays materials plays a big role. I mean, obviously we know skin suits are super important, but blade technology, recovery, fueling, travel setups, all that kind of stuff is now at such a high level that you really can't leave any stone unturned.
Right.
Do you think some of that came from switching from the fixed blade to the clap blades, where you can carry more speed? So instead of just the power aspect of it, that made it even more important to be able to function with highlights, I guess. That's
a good point. I would say in the beginning, because when everyone was on fixed blades, and mainly when we were racing on outdoor tracks, it was more of a novelty to be able to race on indoor tracks. It was still probably more 50-50 back then. The bigger guys, physically had obviously an advantage, especially when you're racing outdoors. You could push through the elements a lot better.
The skaters were bigger. Even long distance skaters were.
Oh yeah.
They were massive back then.
The bigger you were, and even on the women's side, the bigger women could push through those elements a lot more. And when things went to indoor more, then you started to see a little bit of change in the physique. A little bit more leaner, because you didn't want to carry the extra weight at higher speed. And then when the clap skates came in, a lot of the coaches at that time, they were like, it's just an add-on. There's nothing different. Right. They're just going to train the same. But I think it took about 3 to 4 years to realize, like, the physiology is affected because of the clap skate. We're carrying higher speeds now. Backs are getting wrecked because of the longer extension through the hip joint and so forth. So they had to really reevaluate and kind of alter things. So when coming into 2002, you could see, and obviously first Olympics at a high altitude, so obviously the times are going to be faster, but I don't think people really anticipated just how fast. 3 years out from the games, the coaching staff at U.S. Skating, they were like, put down times on a board, like, what do you think it's going to take to win in 3 years? And when we presented that to the athletes, they were looking at us like, you guys are out of your mind. But I think 9 out of 10, we were within about half a second out of the events. So I do think that the claps played a big role in reevaluating, and you started to see even the sprinters start to slim down. For sure in the distances, they started to slim down. You started to see more marathon skaters coming over and doing the distances, as you know. And right now there's, between claps and 99.9% of the time being indoors, technique is obviously the driving factor, because once it went majority indoors, the smaller guys had a chance.
Yeah, it's to me, claps are just more dynamic, right? Like you're not as you said, you can't open up as much. Range of motion is less on the fixed skates. But I had this discussion with DJ at one point.
Dan Jansen.
And I thought it was interesting that he felt that back then skaters skated better. And now I've seen videos of Bonnie plenty at this point, and she did skate super nice.
You couldn't fool it. Like you had to push straight to the side.
Right.
You had to point straight forward.
But to me, it's still,
more
it's different, but it's the same level. Like you're trying to get to the same, the most ideal technical skating that you can. It's just a different looking technique
it's just not
than
the
it used to be. And I would almost say even more so now. People are, like you said, that you can be a little bit smaller if you skate just that much better. Before, since you're a little bit more locked in, you're more reliant on just power.
Right.
So something's got to give, and that would mean the technical side would be a little bit less back then.
Well, maybe DJ's point was more so like on fixed blades, you could tell who could skate fast and who couldn't, because there was a significant difference in efficiency. And obviously I always talk about there's a difference between technical fundamentals and style.
Yeah.
Somebody could look stylishly bad but do the fundamentals well,
Right.
and so they could still skate fast. Then you got the blend that they skated really technically well but they also look good doing it, you know. And I think maybe DJ kind of like pointed out, like you could tell right away if a skater was going to be fast because they were quiet, they weren't scratching the ice, they were in the push, and the minute fatigue or in the lactate hit, there was no faking it. The minute you start scratching and pushing back, you're slowing down.
Okay.
So when in the 97-98 year, when claps came about, skaters that were never even in the A division in World Cup got on claps, and now we're not only in the A division, they were actually starting to win and set world records, because it allowed them to push off the toe, allowed them to push a little bit back and not lose speed.
Yeah.
And that's where I think if you look at the three top male sprinters in 1997, you had Manabu Horiz, Casey Fitzrandolph, and Sergei Klevshenya. Those were the top three guys at World Sprints. The next year, all three of them struggled.
Yeah.
You know, Fitz had a great first 500 in Nagano, second one not so good, but Manabu and Sergei weren't even medal contenders now. They had to relearn technique because the gap had closed so much that it allowed like lesser competitors to be much more competitive.
I know like Boudier really struggled too. Seemed like he never fully got the clap skate versus, like he did set a world record on
in the 1500 on fixed blades. He said, at
that must
the
have been
finale.
also like all of a sudden your world record is not even like amongst the 10 best times ever.
Well, so that because the claps only came in at the second half of the 97 year. I should say that the Dutch juniors used it the year before at the Junior World Championships, and then the Dutch women at the Europeans in 97 used it and beat Tony de Jong, ended up beating the East Germans, where the East Germans were just dominant. And then people started making the switch over, and then by World Singles in Poland, at Warsaw, you had a hodgepodge. You had some that were on fixed blades, you had some that were on claps.
Oh my God, could you imagine being on the wrong one?
Yeah. And then by the end of the Calgary finale, where a bunch of skaters went up there and skated on claps and broke world records, everyone was scrambling to get on claps with less than a year to go before Nagano. And some people just couldn't get them, or they weren't getting them till late. And so it was definitely a big time period, and things were changing so fast that people were trying to adapt and figure that stuff out.
It's crazy if you go back like over the last 100 years of the sport. I feel like it's been small things improving all the time, but then the big three things all happen within 10 years, like the fast suits, rubber suits, clap blades, and then all of a sudden skating is indoors. All of that happened like within 10 years of,
and at an altitude rink that now for a while Calgary and Salt Lake could go back and forth. I think it's pretty certain now that Salt Lake is faster, but just kind of made me think like about the other competitors and shifting around, like, is there an era that you felt like was the most competitive?
Whew.
You know what I mean? And this could totally change per distance. Like I see between, I don't know, there's just like different shifts where everybody kind of got back up to different things.
Yeah.
So like after, after Sochi, where Pavel came onto the scene and just started crushing everybody, that like that next season was the entire 500 group was
So
crazy
5-6 people
close.
going on to 34.
Crazy close.
That was-
Right. And in these last few years, I feel like the women's 3000 has been really close across the board. You don't really know who's going to win, and between first and 12th is very close. So yeah, like, is there an overall era that you think?
That's a good question, and to be honest, I think it's generational because, like you said, like in each distance, you might have one or two, or just less than a handful of competitors that were really, really tight for like a year or two, and then the gap starts to close.
Yeah. When? At what point was it like the most like?
Right.
All of a sudden,
you know,
somebody like the world record was out there. Like I consider, just sticking with the men's 500 because I probably know it best, but like around, let's say Vancouver, I would say it was one of the weaker eras because Witherspoon had set a world record that sat there for a while.
Right.
And it just didn't seem like the depth to 20th was great.
Yeah.
Now the top, to win in any distance at any moment, I think is still the same.
Right.
It's always super difficult, but to be in the top 10, was it harder or easier at different eras?
Yeah.
And again, in that few years, I think easier. After Pavel, harder, and now with Jordan, is it gonna?
Right. And I mean, with the Jeremy,
33.5.
right. Well, with the Jeremy, equation, like, because he was within that 10th for like 6 or 7 races,
Right.
but it was just him. So was he just an anomaly at the time,
Right.
and everybody else was tight, and then it took a while to catch up because Jeremy was such a phenomenal skater and athlete, and it just showed like how special he was at that time.
Yeah.
Or was it, like you said, was the field just that weak at that time, and it took a while to close the gap? I'm not sure. Maybe it's a combination of both.
Yeah.
Because I just think that the minute somebody you get the X factor that comes in and raises the level and they say, okay, that's what's possible. People start to believe it. They start to figure out their training programs, technique, all this kind of stuff. How do I close the gap? How do I figure it out? And I think definitely Pavel was another shift. Like, holy cow, we got to go up against this monster. What do we got to do to win?
Right.
I remember sitting on the pads at tee-off at World Cup Finals one year with Michelle Mulder after he went, he raced, and we're sitting there talking, and you talk about the whole history of doping and this and that, but it's like we both said, no matter what, we got to beat them. We got to figure out a legal way to beat them.
Yeah.
And so I think that's where, to be honest, I don't think they're I can say pinpoint where it was the most competitive, because
Fair.
I mean there was, when DJ was skating, it was him and Uwe Mai from East Germany, 2-time Olympic champion, right? But then they would swap world records every weekend for like a month, prior to Albertville.
Yeah.
And then you would get, any of the Japanese guys at the time, even their B team could win at that time. So like you get the 4 starters on their team and they could be in the mix.
Right.
And then you had the rest of the lane fillers, as it was called. But, shoot, I just think it's cyclical.
Yeah. We looked at, I think you and I discussed this another time off making a video, and like we looked at the 1500 and how sometimes, I think maybe even more so in a 15, where it's just like there's 3 guys that are really good, and then it's just
the rest
a second, another second. But then we look back to Sochi's Olympics, I think, and the difference between Kuhn and Brodko was like nothing. And then you look down the list, and Shawnee was like 6th or 7th, and he was only like a 10th off the podium still.
Right.
And then it was still close for a while.
Right.
We've seen like Jordan
it's
a second and a half after Ning, a second after you got like Petter, Kiel. It's like,
I mean, there's a time.
So it just depends on when.
There was a time between 2010 and 2014, like sprint men's 500, like you could see the podium from 10th place because it was that tight. Each 100th was a place. And But like you said, even the distances have now really tightened up where you don't know potentially who could win on that day.
That women's 3K, it just keeps coming up for me because the record has not broken in a while.
Yeah.
And so now everybody's just getting closer. We got a lot of girls in 3 minutes and change, but they haven't not,
Well, 3
passed
and
the
5K
world
is
record
pretty
yet.
crazy how
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
flutter range just
it's
is
getting
kinda-
closer.
But also look
Yeah.
at too, when it comes to world records, there's always times where the records were not just a result of the performance itself. As we all know, there's a lot of things that go into a great performance. Maybe that day it was just a super low air pressure day, and she's on one.
True.
I mean, I remember after the 2019 World Cup Finals here, Tucker Frederick sends me a text. He's like, "Water should test, put the Utah Olympic over in the testing pool because world records were going down left and right."
Those are hard too.
That was a wild weekend to watch. Time just gets passed by all these people.
Like when you knew the last day of that
What
World
happened?
Cup, when P would break a world record with like still 2 pairs to go, they would really celebrate. I've never seen that.
Well,
before.
yeah, I mean-
might be not on the podium for this one.
Debo breaks the world record in the 1500. She comes around and she's like, "That's not gonna last." And she's like, "That's not good enough."
It wasn't.
And it wasn't.
And then 1,000, same thing in
Right.
reverse.
Right.
Where 2 people broke the world
Yeah.
record, right? Miho and now.
And now in the same pair.
And then she beats him by a 10th.
Right.
Oh my god.
Right.
I thought of a thing. This thing about the men's 500 getting so close. I just remember because that comment was a wild thing for me to hear, especially coming from long distance. The year after the Pyeongchang Olympics, where Lorenzen Howard, he won the 500, and then he was like 10th at the first 2 World Cups, around 10th. And I just overheard an interview with Norwegian TV. He was like, "So what's been the issue, or how come you went from that to this kind of?" And he was like, "I think I've just been like 1, maybe 2 tenths slower.
Yeah.
Like
Right.
maybe it's like I weigh a kilo more, or
Well, he
just
won the
super
first
slightly
500
adjusted
in
my-
over Euro, and then after that,
Oh,
he
is it
kind
then
of
Yeah.
tracked it off. But again, like the
But
gap
then
was
it's
so
like,
small.
You put your blade a little there, or you
Right.
sharpen with a different stone or whatever. It's like, well, now I'm just 1/10 slower every time. That goes from top 3 to 9th.
Can be.
But not only that, but like he's coming off being Olympic and World Sprint champion,
Yeah,
right?
sounds-
Who knows what his summer looked like after you have a season like that?
Have extra beers.
The marketing demands on you and everyone wanting your time. It affects your ability to train properly, and maybe you just want to break.
Yeah.
You know,
So a
maybe-
little reprieve. Also, the motivation is good. You got it goes
Where
down
you
just
go
a
from
tickle.
there. Right.
Okay, and then you build it back up.
Yeah. Give him a chance to breathe and
Lifelong
enjoy it,
achievement,
right?
maybe. We've talked about a lot of the other, developments in the sport and technical gains and stuff. But where do you see the sport going in the next 10 to 20 years? Any new advancements you think are going to be part of the sport, or anything you can think of in that realm?
Well, I look at it more from an organizational standpoint. I think in a lot of ways, countries are forced against a really hard situation right now. There's only a couple of countries that I would consider like quote unquote big countries that have a lot of resources and finances at their disposal. And I think the ISU has to honestly look at the health of the sport overall and treat it as a global sport. Because you take our situation, like just throwing in the 4 continents, that's an added expense that we can't pay for. Our Olympic Committee doesn't value it because even though it's an ISU championship, it really isn't directly connected to any kind of Olympic level or Olympic ending type of mentality. And we already struggle going to World Cups, as you know, financially. So I think that's the first thing, is to make sure that the health of the sport is impacted in a positive way from a global perspective. It's not just a Dutch-centric sport or European-based sport. Otherwise, we're really going to be in trouble, because then you're only going to have a handful of countries that are participating. And anytime you have a sole dominance from one area, and no matter what the sport is, it's never good. From a technology standpoint, that's a really good question. I mean, obviously, materials continue to develop, advancements in metals, fabrics and stuff like that will obviously be something at the forefront of our sport. Fortunately, in a way, we're still basic They're not like cycling where
Yeah.
they use a lot of different materials, you know, for the bike and for, you know, for the rider. For us, it's the skin suit and the blades.
Right.
You know, maybe in the boots there could be some technology. Who knows? It might end up even being more mechanical. I mean, no one uses a double clap anymore. That was a thing 20 years ago and never really came about. I actually thought that had some potential, but to make a boot that didn't break on you, you know, that was tough. I really think if ovals themselves wanted to really enhance the sport, there's a lot of things that can go into the development on the design of the ovals, the ice, obviously, maybe padding shape to direct airflow once the skaters are going, just to make it faster. Obviously, that's why I think the ISU really values Salt Lake City and Calgary, that combination. They want world records, they want fast conditions. They consider these the ISU championship facilities in North America. So I think that, you know, other facilities, even at a sea level, you know, can do things to enhance their times, and, you know, and not by just turning on fans and stuff like that, which, you know, most countries do, most rinks do, but without artificially damaging the sport.
Right.
You know.
Yeah, it's something that can change, right? The wind speed in the building could change between person to person.
Right.
Speaking of, I mean, I think the Milwaukee World Cup is going to be super cool. We know it'll be sold out because our Olympic trials are sold out. Even when there wasn't spots on the line, people still show up to the races. They put the beer tent outside.
Exactly.
And so I think this isn't really advancements of the sport, but just making the sport more visible and exciting.
Literally,
like at least the Salt Lake World Cup last time was very exciting. There was a lot of people in the building, which was cool. And that has not always happened. So however they advertised, continue that. And then I think using the same rinks that are actually good, like with fans, not just because they want to host it, but like, you know, having another World Cup, no offense, in Tomashev where it's cold, the skaters don't really want to be there, and it's not like they get any fans anyways. It's just like another building to have the races in. But using Heronveen a bunch, I think, is smart. Inzel, places that people show up because that looks good on TV. And you know, also with that, like these last Olympics, the Paris Olympics were super successful, and I think because they were visible, you could watch it anywhere you wanted online. Peacock had every single event, and you know, wherever else in the world, but you could really see the sports however you wanted.
I do think though the flip side to that, those are all valid and good points. Having sat in coaches and ISU meetings regarding locations to host venues, number one, that's one of their biggest challenges right now, because there's a lot of facilities, even the good ones, that don't want to host because it's a money loss. And maybe the only rink that can make money is tee-off.
Right.
But even tee-off, as good as it is, and that's the mecca of our sport, they run into problems because if you have too many events there, a lot of the local skaters, the club skaters, the master skaters that pay thousands of dollars for a membership to skate, you eventually could potentially lose about 6 weeks of the season that you're not allowed to skate there because of events, both domestic and international.
Right.
Also, you know, I've been in a situation where I've been at a really good rink, but the organizing committee is just bad. I've been in a situation where the location may not be the greatest, but the organizing committee was great, and it made it worth being there. So there has to be a good balance, because from a coach's perspective, if I have an organizing committee that is on point, that addresses any kind of issues that come up right away, and that the teams can operate and be as fully prepared as possible, I think for me, that's managing a team, that's really, really important. Exposure on TV is critical.
Right.
And we definitely, at least in the US, since 2005, haven't had the exposure. Once the figure skating contracts got renegotiated and speed skating got axed out of that contract, no longer were we on primetime TV and so forth. That really hurt our visibility in this country. And now where you can't even just watch it on TV, you gotta buy a streaming package or buy, you know, something to watch it overseas. that makes it less accessible. And I think any sport, marketing and visibility is number one key for it to be a popular sport.
Right.
For it to function,
Yeah.
It's the
Even
only
if
way
it's
to-
free, just which at least some of the competitions are on YouTube now.
Yeah.
But they need to just keep that going because otherwise
Yeah.
nobody sees it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, we had one last question to discuss.
Okay.
That would be interesting. Jordan Stoltz, do you think he can do the air kite?
So if we're to equate apples to apples, are you
Yeah.
talking about the height and being 500 to 10K
500
or
to
just
10K.
5 gold
Let's
medals?
say 500. Do you think? I mean, he already won the other 3.
Let's give him the master.
Do you think he could win a 10K?
With the proper training, I think he could. I don't think it's a a given.
Right.
I think he would have to do a lot more development, but he works hard. He's obviously a very talented skater. He's got a good mindset.
Yeah.
I don't think he's afraid to work.
Yeah.
That's the thing with the 10K, as you know, you've done them. Obviously that's one of your
It's a lot of
businesses.
pain.
It's a lot of pain, but you gotta have the mental focus to sustain. 13 minutes, 12 minutes of almost redlining that whole way, and that takes time. He's done the cost. In a world championship setting, can he extend that to the 5K and 10K? I wouldn't say no at this point. I think he's obviously the best skater in the world right now, and he's definitely got the talent and the ability to do whatever he wants in the sport. He's done a lot in a short period of time.
Yeah.
So if you would ask me this 3-4 years ago, before Beijing, I'm not ready to hand him the keys to the kingdom.
No.
But I would say now, the maturity that he's shown, I'm not going to put anything by him. And kudos to his coach, Bob Corby, for really, really, keeping him reined in, keeping him healthy. And I do think that the world is at his fingertips right now.
If you have any comments, Jordan, let us know in the section.
He's the main comment he'll give us is we didn't look at the camera. He hates that we look at each other.
Oh, Jordan says that?
Our feedback, yes.
All right.
From Stoles. But yeah, well, thanks to Ryan here for giving us his time. Super
thank you
interesting
guys.
discussion. Hopefully we can do more of these because we're learning a
Yeah,
lot.
we learned a
Even though
ton.
I've heard some of the same stories from you in the past, it's still like different pieces or thinking about it different. So I love to hear
I love
this.
talking shop, you know me, so
Cool. Well,
appreciate it.
We'll have you back on.
Cool, love it.
Yeah, please leave some comments and questions for either Ryan or us, and we'll see you next time.
Subscribe if you haven't. We'll go skate.